our habits, our processes, our stress levels, the way we work and live. So I want to introduce to you our speaker today. Katelyn is originally from Newnan, Georgia. She received her bachelor's in kinesiology, biomechanics, and exercise physiology from Georgia Southern University. She continued on to pursue her master's degree in kinesiology with a focus in biomechanics by developing research using the V-Fit gaming system to reduce falls in the elderly. Katelyn then spent several years in wellness education for healthcare employees at Florida Hospital, now Advent Health. She was also an active member of the Florida Hospital Speakers Bureau and was invited to speak on various health-related topics to companies in the greater Orlando area, Rollins College, Siemens, Orange County Sheriff's Office, the Original Mattress Factory, and more. In 2017, she became a lead transformation specialist at Pardee, overseeing process improvement work for their inpatients. In her free time, she enjoys hanging with friends and family, staying active, and helping others maintain a healthy lifestyle. So please welcome Katelyn Carroll, talking about the stress lifestyle.
Around really quickly and just hand out some books. We have enough in each pack for your whole table, so if you don't mind just kind of helping us circulate those a little bit. All right, well, thank you all for having me as a guest today. I am thrilled to be here with you, just knowing what you bring to our community and our businesses, and I really appreciate all the work that you all do day in and day out. I'm extremely passionate about health and wellness. That's where my heart is. I believe that you have one life, so you should live it the best way that you can. And I think everyone in this room can relate to today's topic on stress. So just to prove that you're not alone in your stress, even though you may feel like you are sometimes, I'm going to give you just a few facts. I'm going to test your knowledge on stress. So I'll ask you true or false questions, and I just want you to participate by raising your hand if I ask you, is it true or is it false? And we'll just kind of take a good test here to see where we're at. So 3 out of every 4 workers feel stressed at work. How many of you think that's true? I saw someone's hand shoot up in the back, so I'm going to assume that they're relating to this. Okay. According to research, money is the top stressor for most people. Do you think that's true? All right, so it is true. Research does show that overall that is the top stressor. And we'll go into a little more detail about how women and men are actually wired differently. But truly it does come back to that all the time. So about 3,000 adults, in a study of 3,000 adults, about 25% reported as having no means of emotional support when it comes to stress. Do you guys think that's true, 25%? It's actually false. It's 43% reported as having no means of emotional support. We're going to talk about how important it is in this room, and the reason I'm opening it up this way is so that you know you're not alone in your stress. It may feel sometimes like you're isolated and you're going through something very specific, but I can guarantee you that you are not alone. So stress has been called the silent killer by many in the medical community, and it can lead to heart disease. How many of you think this is true? So my background is in physiology, and this is where I get to be a super big nerd, and I get really excited, but there is a lot of scientific evidence and backing to show that there's a deep correlation between the stress response that is extended over a long period of time. If you stay in a stress state, it can be damaging to your health, and more specifically to your heart. There was a book written in 1993 by Dr. Redford Williams called Anger Pills that relates to the stress response in anger, and it talks about how it has damaging impact on your heart. So we're going to go into that. Another one that might be a little interesting to you, stress can cause our hair to turn gray. How many say true? Okay, it's actually false. I'm sorry we can't use that as an excuse anymore. However, we can still use this excuse. Stress does cause hair loss. So we can still use that as an excuse, right? So it actually shows that if you experience a traumatic event, about 2 months after that event, you'll start noticing some hair loss. So interesting facts. So today there's many different approaches that I could have brought to you today to talk about stress, but my favorite approach is an evidence-based information and practice. I want to bring you stuff that's been proven to work and stuff that's really factual and evidence-based. But more importantly, I have some really cutting-edge research that you can't just Google. I have a heart for research and literature and really understanding some new and edgy methods to stress that maybe you haven't ever heard before. So I hope today to present you with some new knowledge that is exciting and you can take it back to your friends and family and impress them. All right, so the title of today's lecture is The Stress Less Effect, and again, it's an evidence-based approach to transform the stress in your life. I really want to change the way you view stress, but also have stress work for you. I want it to give you the competitive edge, not only at work, but in your personal life. So I divided it into 3 sections, and you have a workbook today that I designed for you that is meant to be taken home and done with your family. It's also, I created it with extra content that I was able to cover in this lecture, and I did that on purpose because I want you to be able to continue this journey at home and still have some learning that's going to happen on your own. So please use that as a resource and get your family involved as well. So the 3 topics or sessions we'll be working through today are where is stress, or what is stress and where does it come from? The second section is really what you came here for. This is why you paid the big bucks to be here today, but it's the personal stress strategies. So I have 21 evidence-based strategies that I'm going to present to you today that you can take and incorporate into your life to help you manage stress better. And then the last section is going to be applying stress recovery to your life and your family's life. The amount of work that you put into your stress recovery is what you'll get out. So I guarantee you, if you find some of these techniques that are working for you and you really like them, hold on to those techniques. But I'm going to give you some new techniques that you may want to add to that repertoire. So what is stress and where does it come from? I'm going to define it for you. We're going to work through that. I'm also going to teach you what's called the Yerkes-Dodson law. It's a stress zone. It's a bell curve. And it talks about being overstressed, understressed, or being in your optimal zone. And I'm also going to talk to you about your sources of stress. You may know what those are, but we really want to hone in on those so you can understand yourself better. Anytime anyone will take you through a wellness topic, awareness is always the most important first step. You have to understand where you're at currently today in order to set those goals of where you want to be. So this first section is all about self-awareness. All right, so stress. A lot of you know what it feels like. You could give me very detailed explanations of what stress does to you. But ultimately, stress is how we interpret the world around us. Would you agree with that? It's a pretty, the way that I interpret stress may not be the way that you interpret stress. I'll give you an example. I'm originally from Atlanta, or South Atlanta, and so when people try to complain about traffic, I look at them and I just smile and nod, and I'm like, yes, 26 is a lot of traffic, right? But where I grew up, it was much different. And then I lived in Orlando, and there's a special kind of person or driver that you will see in Orlando. And, you know, I'll explain them to you, and you might be able to relate. They have an out-of-state license plate, typically. They have the Mickey Mouse stickers all over the back windshield, and they're usually in a minivan. And if I see them coming down the highway, my immediate thought is, I need to get out of their way because they're more stressed out than I am. They have kids in their car. They're probably driving to Disney, and they've been in there for quite some time. So again, we all interpret stress differently, and it looks different for each of us, but that lends itself to know that stress is not a one-size-fits-all approach. The techniques and tactics that I use may not be the tactics and techniques that work for you. So please be very individualized and very specific when we're going through these. How many of you in this room would say that stress is a good thing? All right, I'm hearing it can be. I'm hearing I'm a little skeptical. I'll wait and see what Katelyn tells me, and then I'll make my decision. So stress is actually, it can be a very good thing. And that's what today's topic is about, is how can you make stress work for you? How can you make sure you are managing your stress in a way that will optimize your performance? So some of the benefits, if you don't believe me, these are evidence-based benefits from stress. Increased motivation and vitality for life. Some of you, when you get a little added stress, that's when you really kick into high gear. Now, if you get too much stress, you may shut down. So we're going to talk about that difference as well. It does improve your health. Challenging your body and challenging your system, you actually need that to survive. So stress is actually necessary to live. It's one of those things you can't live with it, but you can't live without it. So we're going to talk about that as well, what it means for your health. And my favorite is it does improve your performance. So I will go into greater detail. So this is known as the Yerkes-Dodson law. It's very widely used in academia and in research. And it shows that there is a direct correlation between the amount of stress you're under and the level of performance that you're at. So what this is telling us is that as I am increasingly getting more stressed, my performance is going to improve or increase up to a certain point. Then, if I continue down that road of increasing stress, my performance is actually going to go down. So it's a lot of athletes use this model to help them in their preparation for a big event. If you're an Olympic swimmer, it's probably not to be on not a good idea to be on the starting blocks with your heart rate in the 140s as you're just standing there. You're probably a little too alert or too stressed. You want to make sure that you're in that optimal zone. So when you are under stress, how many of you have ever experienced being under stressed? Okay, we've probably all been there at some point in our life. Maybe it was a job, maybe it was a task you were given, or you're like, okay, this is not stimulating enough, right? I want something more challenging. It leads to a lot of boredom, leads to a lot of fatigue, it can lead to dissatisfaction. So it is important that we do have some stress in our lives. Now, something you may be able to relate to a little more, how many of you have ever been overstressed? Okay, so everyone in the room has probably been there at some point, maybe you're there today. But when you're overstressed, what can really happen? Have you ever noticed that you may be running out the door and you forget your keys, you lose your keys? And so you blame the dog, right? You're like, oh, it had to be Buddy, right? So being overstressed, we get very forgetful. We may leave the oven on, something we typically would never do. Forget to lock the door, just little things start to slip our mind. But also it impacts your health. You actually get the common cold much easier. Your immune system is suppressed. So there's a lot of evidence to show that that's not healthy for us either. So being in that optimal zone, that's when you're the most creative. I know I have a lot of creative minds and creative friends in the room today. Makes you extremely creative when you are the right amount of stress. It makes your performance better. You're able to think clearly. You're able to problem solve better. And those around you will benefit from it as well. So there's a questionnaire in your book to help you locate where exactly your stress is. And there's a home section on the left side. And this is on page 7. There's a home section on the left side, and then there's a work section on, sorry, I had that reversed. There's work on the left side and home on the right. And really what that questionnaire is designed is to tell you exactly what is causing your stress the most. I'm going to tell you an interesting fact about gender and how we differ just a little bit. Now there's always gray area, there's always crossover with any group of people, but typically women are designed in a way where our brains and our hormones are configured where we place a very high emphasis on relationships. You will see a woman get extremely stressed out if her kid calls her 3 times and she's missed that phone call, or she's going through a divorce, or whatever that relationship mishap might be. She gets extremely, extremely stressed. Again, there's always crossover. There are men that feel that way as well. But with men, they typically place a higher emphasis on achievement. They feel a bigger punch to the gut if they lose a job, or if they don't get that big recognition at work that they need. It really revolves more around achievement. Now again, there's always crossover with both, of course, but we are configured a little differently when it comes to stress. So take that questionnaire with you and feel free to fill it out at home, but that will help you localize where your stress is coming from. The next 3 pages relate to your stress symptoms. Now these are also important because if I asked you today, what is stress? You would probably answer something to the effect of, well, I start getting really shaky, my heart rate increases, I start getting really nervous, I start getting headaches, I start stress eating, I eat a lot when I'm stressed, or I can't sleep at night. Those are what we call the symptoms of stress. And it's really important to notice that there are physical, mental, and behavioral symptoms. So if you go home and you're sitting down, you're looking at this book, please put a little tick mark or a star or circle those common stress symptoms that you typically feel. And you feel free to work through this as we're speaking. But I want to get you to the big part so we can spend enough time on the strategies as well. So those symptoms, again, once you feel those symptoms, it's too late. You have already allowed yourself to go through this stress cycle, and now you're feeling the negative effects of it on the back end. So we're going to talk about that process in just a moment as well. So how many of you believe in the power of the mind, and the power of just your thoughts? So stress begins in the mind. That is the key thing to know about yourself. You don't just wake up one day and you're like, why do I have a tension headache? You know why you have that tension headache. You are already thinking about all the stress in your life well before that headache even started. So the process that we go through is there is a trigger. There is something in your life that is triggering those thoughts. And the thoughts are how you're interpreting that trigger. So one of the examples in your book, and this is just a simple cliche example, but your boss may be a trigger. Maybe the high demands that boss is placing on you is how you're interpreting that fear and that anxiety. You're feeling like they always ask me for something. Every time they come in, they're giving me something more to do, right? So you always interpret, every time you see that boss, you're thinking, what are they about to ask of me, right? So that's your interpretation, which is a very negative interpretation. And then on the back end, you have that anger or that increase in elevated heart rate. That's the response that you're having to your interpretation of the trigger. So one of the important things I'll challenge you to do, and there is a section in your book for this, but to really write through what are some of the big triggers in your life. For some of you, and to be honest, they may be people. Every time you see this person, you immediately trigger a response. Another thing may be time of day. Maybe, as I know some people, around 4 o'clock, they start to get more stressed because maybe they're caring for a parent at home that may be suffering from dementia, and for them, that is extremely stressful on them. So when they're about to leave work, it's like they're, all right, I'm heading back into home mode where I'm caring for this loved one, and it can be extremely stressful. So again, it depends on what your trigger may be. For some of you, it may be traffic. Again, whatever your triggers may be, identify those. That is incredibly important. So this is something I designed for you to really understand how do you currently deal with stress. So the current stress story is going to take your score from your stress at home and work, your top score. So whether it's relationships, that was your top score for home, or whether it's infrastructure for your top stress at work, you're going to write those into your current stress story after you take that questionnaire. And then below that, you're really going to start working through, what do I currently do? What are my symptoms currently? How do I know when I'm stressed? And then below that, what are 6 ways that you currently deal with that stress? They can be positive or negative in your mind. Maybe you grab a big piece of chocolate cake, and that's maybe not something you want to do because you're like, you know what, I really need to quit that habit. It's not good for my health. It feels good in the moment, but 30 minutes later, I'm regretting it, right? So make sure as you're writing out those current stress recovery techniques that you're very honest about what, even if they're negative or positive, because we're going to revisit this at the end of the session, and we're going to really write down what is our future stress story now that we know more techniques and tactics, and how can I be more aware when I'm stressed to implement these tactics. All right, so this is what you came for. This is the fun part. So again, my background is very into physiology. I love the way the human body works. And in addition to that, I love research. So I'm going to provide to you some very cutting edge research that it's going to be very hard to find on Google, but it's very cutting edge, and it will help you get kind of a fresh look at stress. So of course, you knew this one was coming. You're like, all right, this girl's like an exercise girl. She's going to talk to me about how I should exercise, right? So it's the new year. Maybe some of you have set some goals around your own personal health, but I'm going to actually give you a more specific method. Instead of me just saying, go out and exercise, any form of exercise is going to be good for you. But when it comes to stress, there's actually a physiological response to exercise and a way that we can exercise that actually can make you better at handling stress. It can increase our tolerance. So how many of you have ever heard of interval training or high intensity interval training? All right, so With the body, what happens is when you put yourself through a stressful situation such as exercise, it is a positive form of stress, but nevertheless it is stress. Some of you can attest to that. So you're choosing to participate in exercise, so you're elevating your heart rate, you're increasing your breathing rate, your skin is starting to perspire. Those are all symptoms that you feel when you're stressed. So your brain will start to neurologically make that connection that, okay, she's stressing her body. But the good news is you skip all the harmful effects. So that cortisol and all those stress hormones that are going to be released when you're stressed, those do not get released. So the good thing is you're training your body to stress, and then with interval training, as you know, you always stress yourself, you get your heart rate up, you get moving, and then you back off of that and you rest. That is extremely important when you're training to be more tolerant to stress in your life and to overcome that, because you're teaching your body there's going to be a period of stress, but I'm automatically going to start to rest and recover after that. That recovery phase is extremely important. Anyone can go out there and stress their bodies and exercise for an hour plus, but that doesn't teach your body how to recover. It doesn't teach you that pattern that you're trying to get your cells used to. So again, try that interval training. Now, some of you like a little more guidance, and you're like, all right, Katelyn, I hear this whole interval thing, but what exactly, if I'm trying to nail down exactly what you mean by that, what do you mean? One of the easiest ways to tap into interval training is by looking at your heart rate. It is a very good indicator of the intensity that you're exercising at. So most of us feel pretty comfortable in the low to moderate range. This is going to push you out of your comfort zone a little bit, right? Because that's what stress does. Stress pushes you out of your comfort zone. So I want you to just take this as the simplest formula you can use to get you what we call your maximum heart rate. It's a little bit of math, so if I have some mathematicians in the room, you're going to appreciate this. But you're going to take the number 220, and then you're going to subtract your age from that. You don't have to say it out loud, but take that number 220 minus your age. That is going to be what's called your max heart rate. We're going to use that number to be our 100%. You never want to get to that 100% with this activity. So we use, in this example, a 40-year-old. Their max heart rate, 220 minus 40, is 180 beats per minute. So what happens is that 180 becomes our 80% of our max. So that's our center point. That's where we want to focus. If I am 40 years of age, that at 180 beats per minute is going to be my center point. That's what I'm going to keep in my mind. All right, so then, 144 is 80%. I'm sorry about that. So 180 is our max heart rate. 80% of that is 144. So once you multiply your max heart rate by 0.8, you're going to see that 80% of your maximum. That's going to be your mid-range. So if I am this person and I am 40, I'm a walker. Let's see, I'm gonna walk up a hill as fast as I can. I'm gonna try to get my heart rate up. What I'm aiming for is I'm gonna try to get it up to 90%, which is gonna be about 162 beats per minute. So I start to work out, I hit 144, then I'm pushing it up to get to that 162 beats per minute. From there, as soon as I hit that 162, I'm gonna back off to 10% below that midpoint. So again, it's just like the Newton's law of thermodynamics. You probably heard it when you were in middle school or high school. For every action, there is an equal but opposite reaction. Same thing is true with stress and stress recovery. If you have world-class stress, you need world-class recovery. So make sure you're always thinking about the equal and opposite effects of recovery versus stress. And where this really comes into play is if you have a very structured job and you are constantly enslaved to your calendar, and it just drives you crazy. On the weekends, you'll probably notice that you want to be more spontaneous. And the reason why is because your body is craving something opposite in order to recover from your usual mundane task. So the same thing applies in your real life. You want to make sure you're applying that recovery in an opposite way that you're used to feeling at work. So from here, what you're really doing is, again, you're pushing up to that 90% where you're stressing your body, and then you're recovering an equal and opposite amount around that 80%. So you're bringing it down to about 126 beats per minute, which is going to be about 70%. So it gets a little technical in there, but I wanted to give you that information because it really does work. And you'll start to see the difference in your life when you start really training your body that way. Again, do what you love. If you're not a runner, don't run. A lot of people hate running, especially here, it's really hilly. So if you like to walk, walk. If you like to swim, go cycling, whatever that is. Your next question to me is going to be like, okay, Katelyn, how do I know what my heart rate is? And if I don't want to go out and buy a heart rate monitor, there's actually 2 other methods you can use. So the first one is obviously you can buy a heart rate monitor. Some of you have Fitbits that tell you. I actually own no exercise devices, and I know that's weird because I'm a millennial, but I prefer the old-fashioned way, which is what's known as the talk test. So the talk test is if I am walking with someone or running with someone, I should be able to barely carry on a conversation with them. It should be very challenging. So if we start chatting and it's easy for me to talk to you, then I'm not at my 80%. 80%, it's going to be pretty hard to talk. If you're alone, you can always do the old sing a song trick where you have your headphones in, you just start singing. If it's challenging to sing, then you know you're about at 80%. So that's a free way to do it. It's not 100% accurate, but it's very close, and it will work just fine. And then, of course, the other way, being in healthcare, the manual pulse check is always a good one. If you know how to take a manual pulse on your wrist or on your neck, that's also a good way to get your heart rate. So again, very interesting evidence behind that to show that, again, you want to stress your body, then recover, and you want to train your body. When it comes to mental stress, you want to automatically train yourself so well that when you start stressing, you automatically start recovering and moving into that zone. All right, so some of you that are not exercise fanatics, I'll show you some other methods. This is not meant to be an exercise lecture. So there's another phenomenon known as successive approximation. So stress is about getting you out of your comfort zone, right? We don't like to be out of our comfort zone. So successive approximation is a safe and easy way to get yourself out of your comfort zone and allow your body to feel that stress response, but not too much to the point to where it's negatively impacting you. So in your books, there's some examples. But successive approximation is about doing something that you fear. Now, don't do anything illegal or anything that will hurt you, but putting yourself in a little bit of fear is a good thing. How many of you are terrified of public speaking? Okay, it's a good thing that I'm not. So if you are terrified of public speaking or even speaking up in a meeting, challenge yourself to make a step towards doing that. So maybe say, you know what, I'm going to speak at the next meeting, the next team meeting that I have. And I know that sounds silly, but it's going to get you out of your comfort zone and allow your body to experience a little bit of stress so that you can increase your tolerance. Some people, snakes are very scary. I'm not a big fan. But again, if you expose yourself in a safe way where you work yourself up to it, then that might also help you. My favorite example is a roller coaster. So how many of you are terrified of heights or roller coasters? Okay, so it's a good thing we're on the first floor today, so we can talk about this. So for some of you, if you were to walk up to the top of this building and look out, you would think, wow, that is awesome. That'd be me. I love heights. I'm an adrenaline junkie. For others of you, you would be up there terrified. You would be shaking, and we would just both be standing there, right? We're just standing there. But your body is telling you that you are in fear, you're in danger. So you're interpreting it in a way that is causing your body to react with a stress response. So for roller coasters, if you're scared, one way to overcome this may be, first of all, you just look at a picture of a roller coaster. This is successive approximation. Then the next step is you actually go to a theme park and watch people ride that roller coaster. Then next, you may ask a friend or family member that you trust so they don't mess with you, hey, what is it like to ride that roller coaster? And then that last step will be actually doing it. Now I know that sounds silly, but again, it's a safe way to work up to overcoming something. And those of you, how many of you have ever overcome something that you feared in your life like that? How did you feel after? Relief? You feel almost invincible, right? You're like, I just did that and I never thought I could do it. I used to be a runner. I say used to because I don't competitively run anymore, but I remember when I was racing, I got asked to do a half marathon when I was in high school, and I was like, I'm not going to be able to run 13 miles, right? Well, I ended up doing it, and afterward I was like, wow, you just feel this sense of accomplishment. You feel like now 3.1 miles is nothing, right? So again, increasing your tolerance, submitting yourself to things that you never thought you could do before can actually make you a stress ninja. It can make you a lot more resilient. It can make you a lot stronger when it comes to stress. This is my favorite one, the next one. How many of you own a rocking chair? Okay, so this is one of my favorite studies when it comes to stress. There are two really big stress gurus out there. One is Dr. Nick Hall, and the other is Dr. Dick Tibbetts. He is a psychologist, and Dr. Nick Hall has a psycho-neuroimmunology background. So what they did is they said, okay, let's get these NASCAR drivers together, because they work with a lot of professional athletes. And let's do a test. Let's see how high their heart rate is when they get into the driver's seat of that race car. I don't know about you guys, but if I was in the driver's seat of a race car, about to go 200 miles an hour, my heart rate would be in the 140s or higher. I would be, be beating out of my chest. So they found the group of the drivers where their heart rate was unusually high for just sitting, right? They don't want them to be too excited yet. We want to keep that energy, keep that alertness so that our performance can stay where it needs to be. So they pulled those guys out of the car and they told them, all right, we have rocking chairs set up in the pit over here, and we're gonna get you guys to rock for about 20 to 30 minutes. What do you think their response was to that? I'm paying you how much to sit in a rocking chair before a race? So they did it. They said, all right, we'll try it out. They had the heart rate monitors on them. They got them back into the driver's seat of the car. And as they were sitting there, they noticed that their heart rate was right in that optimal range. And at the end of the race, their results showed that they actually performed better. So I'll explain to you physiologically why a rocking chair can do that. So when your head repeatedly tilts back and forth from 15 to 17 degrees, which all you need to know is that's about like sitting in a normal rocking chair, and you're repeatedly rocking, the blood pressure in your carotid arteries that are in your neck, it increases. That tells your body to stimulate what's called the parasympathetic nervous system, which is your calming response. So rocking back and forth, increasing that blood pressure in your neck is telling your body, slow down, calm down. It'll slow down your heart rate, slow down your breathing rate, and you'll start to feel a lot more relaxed. Why do we rock babies? To calm them, right? It's the same effect. It's that calming, repetitive motion. So there actually is a physiological response that happens in your body when you rock. So if you have a rocking chair, feel free to take advantage of that when you're stressed. But also, if you don't have one, feel free to get one. That's one of my favorite techniques. The next one is progressive muscle relaxation. This is, a lot of people find this really helpful. It's not one that I use a whole lot. But it may be really helpful for you. How many of you get tension headaches? Okay, so progressive muscle relaxation is a very, very effective tool if you do it the right way. But it's all about feeling that muscle tension voluntarily. So me flexing my toes, flexing my calves, flexing my thighs, all the way up to they say your temples, actually teaches your body to be able to recognize that tension in your muscles and then voluntarily relaxes. So you're teaching your body again, all right, I know what it feels like when I have this tension in my muscles, and now I'm going to train myself to relax and show yourself what it feels like to have your muscles relaxed. So that is also a very, very good technique if you get a lot of tension in your back and your muscles and you have a lot of tension headaches. So worry, how many worriers do we have in the room? If you are a parent, I know your hand is raised. So worry is interesting. One of the worst things you can tell someone, and again, this still relates to the stress response. Worry is fear of something that has not happened yet or something that doesn't exist. We fear the unknown. We fear the what if, right? So these are your anxious, apprehensive personality types that are really in fear of what could happen. We all have this in us to some degree. The worst thing someone can tell you is what? Don't worry.
Don't worry.
That's the worst thing you want to hear. Then you start worrying more because you're like, well, you're not worried. Someone's got to worry. I'm going to worry. Right? So This is also another interesting phenomenon that happens. How many of you get home, you're getting ready for bed, as soon as you lay down, you have this pillow that causes you to start thinking about everything in your life that you're worried about. I mean, you start, what's the meaning of life, right? I have the same pillow. It's like every night I lay down, I can't stop thinking about everything going on in my life that I'm stressed about. What happens when we do that is a scientific effect known as classical conditioning. Some of you know Ivan Pavlov's theory of classical conditioning. Every night, if I'm coming into and laying in bed and I'm immediately starting to think about everything that's worrying me, my bed is then going to become a space of worry. You don't want to do that. I promise you. You want to sleep at night. So what you need to do is you need to train yourself to disassociate that by associating worry with a different space. And this may sound silly, but it really is scientific and it really works. So creating a worry space in your home that is somewhere you don't associate with good things, not your favorite chair, not your favorite couch, somewhere that you don't normally sit. Use that spot as your worry space. But most importantly, how many of you are at work and all of a sudden all your worrisome thoughts start to creep in? It happens to us, right? As type A and as geared and as driven as you are in this room, there are moments in your life where you are so stressed about what's going on at home that you cannot function the full day without thinking about it. So what you need to tell yourself is if you're at work, say, all right, and this may sound silly, but it works. This afternoon, I'm going to get home at 5:30. I'm going to go sit in my worry spot for 30 minutes, and I'm going to worry about this. One of two things will happen. You'll either be like, this is ridiculous, and I don't need to worry about this anymore, or you will truly do it, and you will get through to a solution. You will think through it so much to where you will eventually just come to a solution. Or you'll say, you know what, I don't need to worry about this anymore. This is ridiculous how much time out of my life it's taking. So again, take control of your worry. Don't let it creep in during your daily task. Don't let it run your life. Don't let it tell you when you need to worry. You control the worry in your life. And that's one way to do it. So there's also another section where you can work through what is worrying you, and that's on page 19. But worry is a real thing, and the population, if you look at the statistics, 15% of our population have levels of worry in their life that are paralyzing, that it's very hard for them to function. And so you're not alone. A lot of people worry, but some people worry to the level that they cannot carry a job, they can't parent to the way they want to because they're constantly worried. So here's a few more that I'm just going to throw out to you. We talked earlier about identifying your triggers. It is extremely important to know what triggers the stress in your life. If you don't know what's triggering it, that's a very good place to start because you have to learn how to interpret it differently. I was watching TED Talks by Kelly McGonigal, and if any of you are into academia, or psychology, she's a psychologist from Stanford University, and she's very, very well known in her field. She's done a lot of great things. But she talked about how, based on our hormones, how we even view stress can impact our health. So if you view stress as a good thing in your life and a positive, it can positively impact your health. If you view stress as a negative, it's going to, again, those stress hormones are going to be released in your body, and over time it's going to have a very negative effect. So your mind is the most important tool that we have to combating stress. So identifying those triggers, changing your perspective. Do you have anyone in your life that is extremely good at telling stories? My sister is a nurse, and they have some excellent stories. I remember she came back from her one of her rotations in nursing school, and I just would sit there and be like, tell me more, because she was so good. She could make a very somber, serious situation seem humorous in a respectful way, but it's just how she dealt with the stress that she was feeling. You know, these patients were going through some really big things, and so she would kind of try to give it a humorous spin without being disrespectful to them, and she was the best storyteller. So asking someone else their opinion is a good way to change their perspective, because my way is not always the right way or the only way. It can really change your perception, which impacts your stress and the response that you're going to feel from that. But also, they also say another technique is to see things from a very detailed level. So Some of us may think of this overall picture that's really stressful, but as soon as we zoom in on something, it doesn't seem so bad. So we can over-exaggerate things. Another method, maybe, to change your perspective is to over-exaggerate something. Again, use that humor to your advantage and try to get someone else to give you their perspective. Meditation is great because who is in control when you are focused on your breathing? We are, right? Breathing is something we can control, and when we are stressed, a lot of times we feel like we don't have any control. So taking a moment to be present, to clear our head, just take those deep breaths, it really does make a difference. Watching your words. How many of you are big on what you say and how you say it? I grew up in a family where you say what you mean and you mean what you say. So for me, words are very important. I try to speak as positively as I can because I know what I say not only impacts me, but it impacts people around me. Sometimes you need some light humor, but always staying positive and doing that is very important. Because if you start saying a lot of negative things, you're going to start to believe them, whether you think it or not. So watching your words is extremely important. Moving your body. So this doesn't mean the word exercise. I won't use the E word anymore, but activity. Just being, I know it's like a cuss word in here, isn't it? We just started the new year. I can't talk about exercise yet. It's too soon. So it's important to just know that any type of activity is good. I mean, just taking a walk outside, just standing up and just shaking your legs out, just moving around. It's important to move. Caffeine. All right, I am a coffee fan, so before I offend you, how many other coffee fans do I have? All right, so I'm not going to offend you by putting coffee down because I love coffee as well. I love caffeine. But caffeine can stimulate our bodies in a way that can simulate the stress response. What I mean by that is it can increase your heart rate, it can make your hands sweat, it can make your system feel elevated. What most people don't know about caffeine is if you're already stressed and you're drinking a lot of coffee, in your mind you may think that's a good thing, but your body is going to feel the negative effects of that. It's just increasing all that unused energy in your body. It's going to make you feel more anxious, more unrest, and more stressed. So know your body, know yourself, know your limit. But also, caffeine has a half-life. It is a drug. It's a chemical that lives in your body for a period of time. So when you drink a cup of coffee, the half-life of that dosage of coffee you just ingested is going to last in your body about 6 hours. So if I drink coffee now, 6 hours later, it's just going to cut in half of that dosage. My body's going to metabolize half of that. So what's important to know about coffee is if you're just drinking cup after cup after cup, you're just increasing the amount of caffeine in your body. So know your body. I know that when I get stressed, I need to limit how much coffee I'm drinking because I'll start getting really shaky, my heart rate will get up, and I don't like feeling jittery. So again, just know yourself. Just a fun fact, large Dunkin' Donuts coffee. How many, okay, so a normal cup of house coffee, how many milligrams of caffeine is just in a normal, and some of you may not know dosages, so I'll give you this as a reference. 60. Normal, yeah, about 60 to 80 milligrams in just a normal, it's pretty weak. It's weak amount of caffeine when you compare it to something like Starbucks. So a large Starbucks coffee, how many milligrams do you think is in that?
250.
So it's very hard to find. I had to dig to find this information because they don't, this is why they charge so much for their coffee. They have very strong coffee. It has about 475 milligrams of caffeine. So what about a large Dunkin' Donuts? Let's compare.
600.
It actually has less. It's 300 milligrams of caffeine. Yeah. So again, just be aware of what you're drinking and how much. That's why people keep going back to Starbucks. They get addicted, right? There's a lot of caffeine. Meal planning. That's one of my favorite techniques. If I buy something, prepare it, bring it with me, I'm going to eat it. I worked too hard for it. Went and hunted and gathered it, so I'm going to eat it, right? So important to think about if you're really trying to eat foods that don't cause inflammation in your body, which is going to make your stress response worse, make your body feel worse, eating those healthy foods, but meal planning around those, being diligent with your family, that's going to make a big difference. Stepping outside. Being outdoors is so underrated, but there is so much research about connecting with nature and spending time outside, unplugging from our technology and getting outside. They even coined a term, nature deficit disorder. There's a book about it where it's people that spend too much time with their screen and not enough time in the green. They're even finding in younger kids that their vision is being affected because they live looking at a screen that's about a foot or less away. When we were growing up, we would look further into the distance, so it's impacting even young people's vision to be staring at these screens. And it's important that we get outside and connect with nature and really find just some peace in our lives of getting away from technology. And then soothing sounds. So I love natural sounds. Water is one of my favorite. I love the sound of rain. There's tons of apps and music stations you can listen to that have those natural sounds that will just, again, give you kind of that calming effect. All right, this is the last portion here, but anger does, it is in the umbrella in the category of the stress response. This number really took me for a loop, and I recently learned that 1 out of every 5 people, about 20% of the population, suffer from levels of anger that are extremely harmful to their health, ending in typically mortality. So what's important to know is that anger is one of the most dangerous forms of stress, which also is going to lend itself to talking about the continuum. You don't just go from 0 to 100, right? Or at least most people don't. We don't just start with, being annoyed and then we go to enraged and resentful. It takes a long time to kind of go through that continuum, but what's most important is to know that the higher up the continuum you go, the worse it is for your health. So the worst emotion you can have for your health is what's called learned helplessness. If you do any type of psychological research, that is the most damaging emotion that you can have when you feel just completely helpless. Anger is right below that. So resentment is the most dangerous form of anger. It's when you've gotten past being enraged. It's when you have gotten to the point where you are so resentful. And resentment actually comes from a French term meaning refill. So the reason why it's so damaging is because every time that memory comes up, that person that wronged you or that situation that you're mad about, that refill effect comes into play, and those emotions come back. And so you're feeling the same intensity of emotions. It's going to have that intense response on you. So be sure that if you have that anger in your life, that you're looking to own that anger. You're really changing the context. You're reframing that story. Some people write it out and then change the language in their story to reframe it and make it less blaming on someone else, but really to own that anger. It's a journey you have to go on, and I wish we could spend more time talking about anger. But if you're looking for another great resource to read that goes deeper, there's a book called Forgive to Live. And it's by Dr. Tibbetts, and he has he's built his whole career around anger and forgiveness. So if you need another resource, feel free to look at that. And then my favorite is also gratitude. Even just driving to work, we live in a beautiful region of the country. And just looking out and just reminding yourselves to be grateful for the life that we have, the food that we get to eat today, and just being a part of something bigger than ourselves by coming to this meeting. Just the little things that are really important. Remind yourself to be grateful. And then when you get home, I have designed this book again, like I said, with a lot of extra in it. Feel free to carve out that future stress story. So it's in your books on page 26. And that's where you can really write, what is my stress? Where is it? Where am I at in life? What's most stressful to me? What are my symptoms? And then below that, what are 6 methods that I want to use and take with me in 2019 to really improve my stress? We don't want to use the old techniques or the old methods that didn't work. Take those that did work with you. Maybe you're doing something now that works. But I want you to really focus in on what are some things that we learned today, some new techniques that maybe you want to try next time you get stressed. So with that being said, the last thing you'll have to do after that is make it personal and post it somewhere where you'll see it or your family will see it. I put mine on the fridge because girls got to eat and I'm going to see it many times a day. So it's a good reminder to stay in the moment, stay aware of your own stress, and like I said before, what you put in, you'll get out. So thank you so much for your time today. If you want to look at any references or you need any further resources, please let me know. And I hope you have enjoyed the presentation, and at this point I'll I'll take any questions or comments that you guys may have. Yes.
First, what is your email address?
Yes. It is KATELYN.CARROLL. And then we have the longest email at party, but it's at unc.unc.edu. This is what happens when a university makes hospitals. All right, so yes, please feel free to reach out to me. I think we had another question.
I deal with someone that I think he's under a lot of stress and he really lashes out and then he's always remorseful afterwards. I just wanted to see if I could get an extra book and I'm just going to put this in his mailbox.
Maybe put a little sticky note on there. I like the subtle approach there. I like that. Yes.
Does the source of the stress affect, does the source of the stress matter in terms of its effect on people, or it's just my interpretation of the sources of personal
That's a multifaceted question. It's a very great question. The source is important depending on how much emphasis you place on it. So if it's a relationship, and I personally place a lot of emphasis on my personal relationships, I know automatically that if it's something to do with a relationship, then I just shut down with everything else. So you really have to know yourself to know what sources are your biggest triggers, and then you know that that's going to impact your health more. So it's all individualized, it's personal to you, what you place emphasis on.
All right. Thank you again. So grateful to Katelyn for sharing all this amazing information and the workbook. I know I'm excited to dig into that after this luncheon. So thank you again, Katelyn, and we hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. We'll see you again next month on February 20th. All right, have a great day.